Yes, Jay, my life. Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome everyone to this channel named Geeks for Geeks, and my name is Gaurav. And today we guys will be developing this login form using the basic HTML and CSS coding in the Weblab on code.org. So let's come on this code.org platform first, and how can we access Weblab? That's what we're going to learn first. So what you can do, when you access your dashboard on this platform, automatically these are the two buttons that will be visible to you guys, getting reflected right on the top over here. Now you can hit this, you can come down over here, and then you can hit this view full list button. Okay, and here you are going to come across this Weblab option. Now in order to see this view full list option, you need to come over here on this create button, and when you will hit this is a cascading menu you're going to come across. Now you can hit this view all projects, and automatically this is the page you're going to get redirected to. Now when you will come down, this is the button which is going to be visible to you. Let's hit this Weblab and check out where it is going to redirect us. So this is the Weblab environment, and as you can see by default, here already some lines of codes we can see in this workspace. Now this is the basic structure of HTML. Okay, these are some tags which you can find by default written over here in this workspace. This line of code which you're seeing in between this these head tags, it is actually linking this style sheet to this HTML document. Okay, so this is a code you have to remember if you want to link some external style sheet to your HTML document. Now let's check out this contact form that we are going to develop today. So as you can see, there are three different parts in which we can divide this contact form. The first part is the header section, in which this login form is visible to you guys. Okay, and then we have this body section in which we have two input boxes, and there are three label boxes in which in the first one we have this username, then in the second one we have this password, then in the third one we have this remember me, and besides just before this remember me we have a checkbox also. And then we have a third part in which we have this gray color background on which we have a button, a cancel button, and here in the right side we have this hyperlink. Okay, so let's now first divide this body into three different sections. So we can make use of division tag, right, in order to divide the body into three different sections. So here, this one I am going to make use of for this login form, and then this second division tag I am going to use for these how many components are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these seven components, for these seven components I am going to make use of this second division tag, and then we can have one more division. Okay, so this one I will be using for this part, this footer part. Let's come back on this code.org platform. Now how can we define this login form? How can we bring this login form over here on this stage area? So what we can do, because it's in bold, so we guys can make use of h1 tags, and let's write down login form over here. So as you can see, now this text login form is visible to us, getting reflected. It is getting reflected on this stage area over here, right? Now let's come down. So after this login form we have one label box, and then we have an input box. Now for defining this label you can make use of this tag named label, and inside this you can write down whatever you would like to whatever you would like to get reflected over here. So username is what we need to get reflected on that stage area just after this login form. So here is this username. Now it is in bold over here. How can we make it bold? So for doing that, we can enclose it in bold tags. So B tags you can make use of for changing the style of this label box. Now just below this label box we have an input box, right? And how can we define an input box in this on this stage area? We can make use of this input tag, and let's have a type of text. So it is going to be a text type of input box. Okay, and then by default this enter username is getting reflected inside this input box. So what we can do, we can make use of this placeholder attribute and get this enter username reflected inside this input box. Okay, let's close this input box, and now it is visible to us over here on the stage area. Fine. Now if you will click this button, this is what you're going to come across. Please fill out this field. Why is it so? Because it is mandatory for the user to fill this input box with some or the other input. So how can we get this kind of thing on the stage area for this input box? What we can do, we can make use of this attribute required. Okay, so it is going to make for the user mandatory to fill something inside this input box. Fine. Okay, now what else do we have? We have one more label box. Before that, before defining the code for this label box and for this input box, I would like to connect this label box to this input box. So how can we do that? So there is an attribute for that you can make use of for, let's say, uname. So because we are using this label box for username, that is the reason I've passed this value uname for this for attribute. Now in order to connect this, for connecting this label box to this input box, what we can do, we can define this property name over here for this input box, and it is going to be uname. So that's how, with the help of this for and name attribute, you can connect this label box with this input box over here. Fine. Now I am going to copy this code and let's paste it just below this code over here. So now we need to define the code for this password label box and for this input field. Let's replace this username with password, and in this placeholder field I am going to change this username to password. What else do I need to do? Okay, so I need to connect this label box with this input box. In order to do that, we can change the name. Let's rename it to PSW for password, and let's make the required changes for this attribute also. Okay, so that's how you can connect this field with this input box. Fine, everything is going to remain the same. So we are done with defining the code for these two label boxes and these two input boxes also. Now there is a button. So in order to get it reflected over here on this stage area, we can make use of I think we need to put this whole thing inside the second division box. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now we can make use of this button tag for defining a button on the stage area. So the type is going to be let's say submit. Fine. And then we can write down this text, whatever text you would like to get reflected on the head of this button. You can write it down over here like this, and then close this button tag, because it is a container tag, right? So we need to define both the starting and the ending tag for this button. Fine. Now as you can see, the button is visible to us over here on the stage area. Okay, what else do we have? So now below this button we have a checkbox and a label box. So let's quickly define the code for these two things also. So I'm going to have a label box first, label box, and then inside this label box let's have the code. Let's define the code for the input box, for the checkbox first, which you can see is visible to us over here on this login form right next to this remember me. So we can make use of this input command, input attribute, input tag again, sorry, and let's make it a checkbox. So this is a value you need to pass for this type attribute. Okay, then we if you want this to be checked by default, so you can pass you can make use of this attribute checked, and let's pass this value checked for this attribute. And now I'm going to define a name also for this checkbox. So the name is going to be remember. Fine, let's close this input type, and after this I am going to have this remember me. Fine, and then we can just close the label box like this. Fine, so as you can see, the checkbox as well as this label is visible to us right now over here on this stage area, and by default this tick mark is also coming on this checkbox. Okay, now what else do we have? So now we are only left with these two components. This is a button and this is a hyperlink over here. Let's define the code for these two things. So I'm going to come inside this third division. Okay, and the first thing that I need to do is we need to have a background color, right? There is a background color we have for this division. So how can we define a background color for this division? We can make use of this style attribute. So this is another way you can style any tag of this HTML document. So style, then we can have this background color property. Okay, and let's pass a value for this background color property. So the color code of this color is F1 F1 F1. Let's see what are we going to get. Okay, and after this we have a button. So let's define the code for this button. This time the type is going to be simply button, and the class not defining a class right now. I will be defining it when I will when I will be styling it. Okay, at that time I will define all the classes, all the required classes. Now what do we have inside this button? We have this cancel text getting reflected inside this button, so we can write it down like this. Let's close this button. Okay, now as you can see, this button is visible to us over here on the stage area, and the background color of this division is gray. Okay, so it is very similar to this background color which is getting reflected over here on this login form. Now what else do we have? We have this forgot password thing also getting reflected in the right side of this window. So let's make use of span tag. Okay, and let's write down forgot, and then because under this this password is a hyperlink, but this forgot is not. So how can we make this password a hyperlink? We can make use of a tag, and then we can make use of this attribute href. Let's pass a null value for this href attribute. We are not going to have anything inside this, and or else we can put a hash, so that if the user will hit that password, he should be redirected on this screen. He should come back on this login form again. Okay, and then we can write down password like this, and let's close this span tag. Okay, so we are almost done. Is there anything we are missing? Okay, we haven't closed this a tag, right? So we need to close it. We can close it. We can define the ending tag for this a just after the point where this password is ending. So now, as you can see, we are able to see all the required components getting reflected on the stage area. Now let's make use of this style.css file for styling these components over here. So the first thing that I would like to style is, let's come back on this index.html first, and let's style this login form part first. So for doing that, we can define a class for this division section, inside which we have this login form. So let's make it, let's say, about header. Okay, and or else we can make it top header. Fine. Now I am going to come on this style sheet, and let's eliminate everything whatever we have inside the style sheet. Fine. And now, what is the class that I've defined over here? It is top header. So we need to style this top header right now, top header class right now. How can we access this class over here in this style sheet? So you can make use of this dot sign for accessing that class, and then you can write down the name of this class which you have defined over here. Okay, after that you can put these curly brackets, and inside this we are now going to define some attributes which we will be styling. So the first thing that I need to do is, see, this login form is getting reflected right in the center. So how can we bring it in the center? We can make use of this text align property, and let's pass this value center for this text align property. So automatically, as you can see, this login form is now getting reflected in the center, right? Let's now put some margin. So I'm going to make use of this margin attribute, and let's pass 24 pixel for the top margin, and then 0 for the right margin, and then we can have 12 pixel for the bottom margin, and then we can have 0 pixel again for the left margin. Fine. So this is what you are going to get as an output. So now there is a gap in between this login form and the top part of this page over here. So you can control the margins, the space outside this component with the help of this component named margin. Right. Now let's go back on that HTML document and check out what else do we have over here. So we have one more. We have this second division tag, in which we have some components. There are two label boxes, and we have two input boxes, and we have a button, we have a label box also, and last but not the least is a checkbox that we have inside this division tag. Now in order to style all these components which are there in this division tag, we can define a class for this second division. So let's put some class name over here. So I'm going to make use of container. So because it's a kind of container, right, in which we have kept everything. So that is the reason I have defined it so. Now we can come on this styling sheet and let's define the required code for that container class. So for accessing that container class, we can put a dot and then we can write down the name of the class like this. Let's place these two curly brackets. Now inside this curly brackets, we can make use of this property padding. Okay, and let's define a value for this padding. So padding is opposite of margin. Margin is for defining the space outside the components. Okay, and padding is used for defining the space inside the component, sorry. So as you can see, before, when this padding was not there, our components were like this, and as soon as I've placed this padding, so we can see some spacing in between this part and this username over here, and also there is some space in between this part and this part over here. So it's just because of this padding attribute which I have defined inside this class. Now let's check out how can we customize our input boxes, these two input boxes over here. So let's make use of input. How can we access this input box? First of all, I would like to tell you that. So because there are only two input boxes, okay, and for both the input boxes we have used this input attribute. Alright, we have made use of this input tag, and the type of this input box is text, and the type of this input box is password. It should be password. Why it should be password? Just because I don't want that if the user is typing over here something, it should automatically get converted into these dots, or you can say bullets, the way it is happening over here in this original form. Fine. Now if you will not define it like this, what is going to happen? If you will type something over here, the other person may see that, and you may share your password indirectly with some other person. So I don't want that to happen. I would like to protect my password. So for that we can pass this password value for this type attribute over here, and everything whatever you're going to type now inside this input box, it is going to get converted into these dots. Okay, now let's come on this style sheet and access these two input boxes. How can we do that? So what we can do, we can write down input over here. What is the type of this input box? The type of this input box is text. So we can write down type is equal to text like this. Okay, and then we can put a comma. Let's copy this whole thing and place it just after this comma, and here we are going to have password. So now what is going to happen? This code is going to help us in accessing this input box, and this code over here is going to help us in accessing this input box which we have defined for the password field. Let's now place two curly brackets. Okay, so first thing that I would like to do is I would like to define the width of these two input boxes. So it should be 100% all the time. That's how we can do it. So as you can see, we are able to see the changes getting reflected over here on this stage area, right? Okay, the second thing that I would like to do is, so as you can see over here, there is some space in between this enter username, this placeholder field, and the borders of this input box. How can we get a view like this over here for these two input boxes? So padding you can make use of for getting this kind of view. So let's pass a value for this padding top, and we are going to have something for the padding bottom part also. So now this is what you are going to get as an output over here on the stage area. Fine. Okay, let's now come on this next line and define some margin for these two input boxes. So I would like to have a margin of 8 pixel and 0. Okay, now as you can see, we are able to see some space in between this label box and this input box over here. Right, similarly we are able to see some space in between this password label box and this input box over here. Why is it so? It's because of this margin that we have defined over here. Okay, so margin you guys can make use of for defining the space outside the component. Okay, and if you want to define some space in between the text you have inside the component and the border of the component, then the best way is to make use of this padding property. Okay, now let's fix the display of these two input boxes. So I would like to have a inline block kind of display. Okay, and besides this, what else can we do? We can have a solid border. So let's have a border of 1 pixel and it should be a solid border. So we can, define this, we can pass this value over here like this, and then we would like to have a solid border of this color. Let's now refresh this page and see what is the kind of output we are going to get. So this is what you are going to see as an output on the stage area, right? Okay, now as you can see over here, we are not able to see the end borders. Okay, so how can we make them visible on the stage area? So by defining box sizing, by sizing the box in which we have placed these input boxes. So we are going to have this border box. Okay, now you will be able to see the borders which are there right at the end of these two input boxes. So that's how you can customize these input boxes, and these are some of the properties you need to remember if you are working on this HTML platform. Fine. So we are done with customizing these two input boxes. Now we are going to customize this button over here. So as you can see, we have made use of this button tag for defining this button. Let's come on this style sheet, and here we are going to write down button first. So this is going to help us in accessing that button. Now what is the background color of this button? It is green in color, right? How can we define a background color? We can make use of this property background color. So if you'll type out something over here, automatically this cascading menu is going to appear. Now from here you can select the relevant property. So because you want to change the background color, you need to select background color, and then you can select a relevant color, the required color from this cascading menu. So let's have a dark green. Let's have dark green. Okay, if I eliminate this dark from here, yeah, now it is green. Fine. So I'm able to see this button has now turned into green. So login over here on the head of this button is getting reflected in white. How can we get this thing? Right now it is getting reflected in black, right? So what we can do, you can make use of this color attribute, and let's pass this value white. Now the text has changed from black to white. Okay, and we have some spacing in between this text and these borders also over here. How can we define these spaces? So again, because these spaces are inside this button component, so we can make use of padding property for having some space inside the button. So let's pass these two values. Now if you'll refresh this page, so this is what you're going to get as an output, right? Okay, let's come down and let's define the margin also for the button. So we are going to have a margin of, let's say, 8 pixel and 30. Fine. And besides that, if you want to have something for, let's first refresh this page and see what is the output we are going to get. Okay, so this is what we are able to see over here. Fine, it is working perfectly fine right now. Now we can define something for the border. So if you want to have a solid border like the way we have over here for this button, you can pass 1 pixel like this, because we want to have a solid border of 1 pixel. Okay, and let's pass this color property, color value. So this is going to be the color of the border, this is going to be the style of the border, and this is the weightage of the border. Okay, let's see what is the output we are going to get now. Okay, so the login button is getting reflected over here in this form, but how can we make it appear the way it is appearing over here on this form? That's what we have to see. So what we can do, in order to expand it throughout, we can play with the width property. Let's pass this 100% as a value for this button over here. So this is what now you're going to get as an output. Okay, let's shrink this window. And what else do we need to do? Let's define this box sizing also for this button. Okay, so as to give it a more good look. So now, the only thing which is left is this. If I am bringing the cursor over this button, so as you can see, the pointer is changing to some hand kind of thing. How can we make it happen? Right now, if you'll bring this cursor over this button over here, it will not change. I would like it to change to a hand-like thing. So for getting this output, for getting this thing reflected on the stage area, what we can do, we can make use of this cursor property. Okay, and let's pass this value pointer. Now when you'll bring the cursor over this button, so it is going to change to a hand-like thing. Fine, so we are done with defining almost everything for this button over here. Let's shrink this window. Okay, let's go back on this login form. Now if you'll bring this cursor over this button, there is a change that I'm able to see getting reflected over here on this button. So the transparency of the background color is going down. How can we make it happen? So we can make it happen, we can get this kind of output with the help of hover property. And how can you define hover property for this button? Let's check it out. So what we can do, we can call this button first. Okay, and then we can make use of this colon. Let's pass hover like this, and then as soon as the user will bring his cursor over this button, I would like the opacity to get changed to 0.8. Let's see whether we'll be able to get the desired result with the code that we have just defined. Yes, we are able to see the opacity of the background color changing, right? Okay, let's now come back over here. Now what else are we left with? So we are already done with defining the required code for these two input boxes, and we are also done with defining the required code for this login button over here. Okay, now let's check out what else do we need to customize. So we have this username, everything is perfectly fine, and there need to be some more space in between this input box and this login button, right? How can we do that? So we can make use of margin property, right? let's do that quickly. Margin, and this time I'm going to make use of margin top. How about 3 pixels? Okay, now I think it is aligned, as well as I'm able to see a proper gap in between this input box and this button over here, right? Okay, let's now come on this third division box. So this is the third division box, in which we have a button and this forgot and one span in which we have this forgot written, and we have one hyperlink also with name password. Right, let's first define a class for this third division tag. So I'm going to define the same class which I have defined for this second division tag over here. So it's going to be container only. Okay, so this is what you're going to get as an output. Now let's now come back over here, and the type of for this button is button. Okay, fine. Forgot password is also getting reflected over here. Now we can let's do one thing. See, this button over here is getting reflected in red color, right? The background color of this button is red, and the text which is getting reflected on the top head of this button is in white. So how can we get this kind of output? That's what we have to see now. For doing that, let's come back over here on this HTML coding, and I am going to define a class for this button. Class, let's say, because it is a cancel button, right? So we can have a class like cancel button. Fine. Okay, now let's go back on this style.css file, and here we have to first check how can we call this button, how can we access this button. So we can access it with the help of this class which we have defined over here. So the name of this class is cancel btn. Let's go back on this CSS file, and here I'm going to place a dot, and then let's write down the name of that class. So it is going to help us in accessing this button over here, right? Now what is let's define the width of this button first. So we are going to have this auto feature for this width property, and then in order to set the background color, we can make use of this background color property. Let's select a relevant color from this cascading menu. So let's go for this one, crimson. Okay, let's refresh this page over here. So this is what you're going to get as an output now. So this button is visible to us over here, and it is just the way this cancel button is getting reflected over here. It is getting reflected in the same way over here also on this login form, right? Okay, what else can we do? We can define some padding also. So it is going to create some space in between the text we have on the head of the button and the borders of the button. Let's have these two values, 10 pixel for the padding top and 18 pixel for the padding right. Okay, let's refresh this code over here, and this is what you are going to get as an output. Fine. Okay, now the only thing which is left is forgot password. How can we make it reflected in this right side of this window? So let's go back on this HTML document first, and here we have this forgot password in between these two span tags, right? Okay, so the first thing that we need to think is how can we access these span tags? What we can do, we can define a class for these span tags like this, .s or .psw. PSW. So this is the name of the class I have defined for this span tag. Okay, I have this class already defined, I think, for some component. Let me just check it one more time. The class for this division tag is container, then for this division tag also the name of the class is container. Okay, we don't have this class, we haven't made use of this class name for any other tag. So we can make use of this class for this span tag. Let's come on this CSS file, and here I am going to write down PSW like this. So it is going to help us in accessing the tag for which we have defined this class over here in this HTML document. Okay, so I would like to see this text floating in the right side of this window. How can we make it happen? So you guys can make use of this float property, and because we want to see it getting reflected on the right side, so we can pass this right value. Okay, now when you'll refresh this page, this is what you are going to get as an output. Fine. Okay, now the only thing that we are left with is there is there is some space in between this forgot password and the top of this division. How can we give this space? So what we can do, because this space is, we need to give this a space inside the component. So for that we can make use of padding property. Let's pass this value 16 pixel. Okay, now let's see what are we going to get as an output. So this is what you will get to see in the output section now. Okay, let's now hit this login button and see what's going to happen. Okay, so nothing is happening right now. And what is going to happen if I will hit this login button over here? Okay, so this error message is getting reflected over here, and it is saying please fill out this field. Why is it happening? It is happening just because it's a kind of form and we haven't defined all these components inside the form attribute. Okay, if you want to give it a form kind of field, if you want to make all these things that we have defined over here, okay, behave like a form, so you need to place everything, whatever you have defined till now, inside the form tags. So that's how you can do it. Right on the top, just after this body, you can write down form, and just where this last division section is ending, you can put this ending form tag just after this ending division tag over here. Okay, and let's pass this method name post for it. So this is generally for posting something from one web page to some other web page. Because this web form is currently not connected to any database, that is the reason. Now if you will write down, if you'll hit this login button without writing down anything over here in these two input boxes, so you are going to see this message getting reflected on the stage area. And let's write down something over here. So I'm putting my own name in this input box, and here I'm going to write down a password. Now if you'll hit this login button, let's see what's going to happen. So you are going to get redirected on some other page. That means that your code is working perfectly fine, right? So this is how you can develop a full-fledged contact form on this Weblab using basic HTML and CSS coding. Hope you guys enjoyed this lecture a lot. Do like and share this video in your group so that more and more students can come and join the lecture and enjoy these free online coding classes which we guys are providing for the students on our channel. Thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day. Bye bye.